Scotty Whittle. We'll do our best here. It's great that you all could come out and join us on another cold Ithaca evening, so we're excited to see such a large audience. Before I start with the introductions, I wanted to let everyone know that next Monday's seminar, March 24th, will be Sarah Kaiser, who will unravel the mysteries of songbird mating systems for you. So obviously a talk not to be missed. Sarah's one of the great young researchers here at the lab, so I hope you'll also give her a good showing at the seminar. She'll give a super presentation. Tonight,
That'll be a talk on promiscuity, you mean?
well, that's, like I said, one worth coming for. So tonight we have Tom Stevenson and Scott Whittle with us. One of the great new dynamic duos in the world of birding who, through their new Warbler guide, will unravel what are undoubtedly some of the great identification mysteries for all of us. One of the great challenges that we all look forward to year after year when the migrant warblers arrive. I want to tell you a little bit about these guys. They foolishly provided me with a CV, and so we'll reveal some of their innermost secrets. I think that's what we've got here. Few places could people share the early birding experiences of Tom better than someone here in Ithaca. He's been birding since he was a kid and under the tutelage of Arthur Allen here at Cornell. So this is a local boy we're dealing with who actually went off and made good.
Trying to make good.
Right, it'll be up to you folks to decide whether he actually made good. His articles and photographs are in museums and publications, have been in museums and many publications, including Birding, Birdwatcher's Digest, Handbook of the Mammals of the World, Handbook of Birds of the World, and a guide to birds of southeastern Brazil. He also leads tours around the world, and he's been to exotic locations such as Bhutan, which he encourages all of us who can manage to get in to go see. It's a place where birds are not afraid of human beings, and just a spectacular cultural experience as well. He's also provided the Macaulay Library with many of his Himalayan recordings, which are a centerpiece of our Himalayan material, which is really exciting. We're starting to get in good material from Bhutan. We've had Himalayan material for a number of years from Nepal. So Tom's really helping us flesh out the offerings of the archive. He's also birded elsewhere in Asia and has contributed many rarities, many first cuts for the archive. He and Scott led a team for the World Series of Birding, a digiscoping team, and won the World Series Cape Island Cup in doing so. Now here's where we get to a sordid background. Any deadheads in the audience? Okay. Or maybe you won't appreciate this, or maybe you will, they're keeping quiet. As a musician, he was a trained musician. He played many concerts, did studio work for many years, worked with several Grammy and Academy Award winners. His clients include the Grateful Dead, Phil Collins, and the FBI. I think the last that's not a group that I'm... In 1991, because of his extensive experience with audio and the real practical side of audio recording, he joined Roland Corporation, where he managed their recorder division. He's recently retired from there as the director of technology. And Roland has, within the last, year and a half, 2 years now? Released a fantastic new portable audio recorder, which is really well designed for the natural history sound recordist. And the primary reason I would say we have this device today is because of Tom's influence on a company that's really dedicated to serving the musician. They now have a device that will also serve the natural history recordist. And partnering with Scott Whittle, who is a professional photographer and educator. He took photographs, lived in New York in the fast lane for many years, and has relocated to Cape May. And now, in combination with Tom, is pursuing his passion for birding and they've been working on field guides and apps and that sort of thing. And tonight they're going to talk with us about their Warbler guide, which is really an innovative approach that combines visual identification cues and audio in a way that really hasn't been done before. So I will curtail my introduction and put these two fine gentlemen in front of you. So,
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, Greg. I've been in awe of the work that the Macaulay Library has done for many years and Greg's work there, and it's an honor to be introduced by him here. As he mentioned, this is kind of a homecoming for me. I gave a talk a few years ago on another topic, but I did grow up here, and we had Monday night talks. They were in a room that's about this big, and there was a gentleman there who used to come to them who smoked a pipe. And every time I smell, which isn't often, but every once in a while I catch this whiff of pipe smoke, it takes me right back those Monday night meetings, because there's just a big part of that experience for me. But my brother and I they had on the wall, they'd do the checklist, and they'd call out all the birds on the checklist. And if you had the first sighting of that bird for that year, you got your name on the checklist. And my brother and I's goal, and my goal was to have like 30 or 40% of those first sightings. And I know one year, especially in the spring, we got pretty close to that goal. So it was a real motivator for us. It was really a lot of fun. So anyway, tonight we're going to talk a little bit about warblers. And it's a little cold for warblers out there now, but we can always dream and look forward to the spring. They're on their way, right? And so, as you know, warblers are some of the most beautiful birds in the world. We really do have an incredible sampling of warblers, like this ovenbird, prothonotary warbler, was singing right in Prospect Park a couple years ago, yellow-throated warbler, American redstart, common yellowthroat, these really stunning birds, black-throated blue warbler. Just to give you an idea of how great we have it, we're going to show you a number of places. I don't know how many species?
14 species.
14 species of old world warblers, just to show you how really cool it is here in the U.S. Have any of you birded in the so-called old world, like Europe and Asia before? So you'll know what I'm talking about here. So anyway, just a quick reveal. Here's a couple of species, a couple more that look quite different, a couple more species. This is different too, and these are really different, and some more different ones, and then a bunch more different ones. So, we really, take a look at that. Really, it's like that or this. So, we really have some good choices here. But one question this raises for me, and has raised for us in the process of making the book, is, have these bright colors sometimes blinded us to the more subtle ID points, or to really studying some of these birds? Because when we see something so bright and beautiful, it becomes easy to think we can just identify it from like a good side view or something. And so we're going to explore that a little bit and say, well, what could some of these ID points that we're missing possibly be, and how can it help us improve our birding skills?
So this is a bird that actually inspired this idea to a degree. This is a bird that was seen in Prospect Park on a walk, and the participant was saying, well, it may be a Wilson's warbler, it may be a yellow warbler, and I'm not sure because I need to see the cap. If I can see this bird from the side, I'll have a pretty good idea.
And here's why he said that.
So you can say it's not, in some ways that's how that's been taught, right? How the way to ID a Wilson's warbler is to see the side view and look for the cap. But in fact, there are quite a number of other ways that you can ID this warbler and a lot of other warblers, including from the side, from below and from 45 degrees. And so we wanted to include a lot more of that information for people because, well, for example, has anyone ever seen a warbler from below? It's a fairly common problem, right? So in some ways, it's kind of silly to have them from the side because you basically just see them from below. So we wanted to include that information.
And fortunately, for this species in particular, the information you get from seeing it from below is actually easier to use for identifying or separating those two species than the side view can be for the drabber or Wilsons especially.
That's right. So now actually you can see the difference between these two. The top actually Wilson's warbler. The bottom bird is yellow warbler. See the yellow in the tail? Diagnostic for yellow warbler. If you see yellow in the tail of a warbler, it's yellow warbler. If you see this long, dark tail with this all yellow body, pretty close to diagnostic for Wilson's warbler. So in some ways, actually, these birds are easier to tell apart from below than from the side. And actually, we have a Undertail chart here that in our book that shows you exactly that. Wilson's warbler's over here, right? And see that long, dark tail? It's actually longer than any of the other similar birds. And the body color is solid yellow as opposed to some somewhat similar birds which have sort of slightly different tones or body patterns. And so that bird's pretty diagnostic. And we actually treat yellow warbler totally differently because of that yellow in the tail. It's actually very different. And we actually have some really cool other diagnostic tail patterns here. Well, here's the similar things to Wilson's, so you can see it's actually still pretty separable. And Canada warbler, redstart, palm, magnolia, black and white worm eating, those birds all have totally diagnostic undertail patterns. If you see that pattern, that's all you need to see and you know what bird you're dealing with. Now, not that you should stop looking at the bird at that point, but now you know what it is and you can actually start to look at it really closely.
Yeah, the key is that the information that you get from below, which is this most common view probably, can be really helpful and easy to use for identification. So we're going to kind of cover that some, as I said before. The way we're going to do that is we're going to use a legacy field guide. So this plate is from a field guide that was probably the most important field guide that's ever been published. And it's a way most of us learned how to bird and identify birds in the first years of birding. And it really put birding on the map in a lot of respects. But since then, we've sort of gained knowledge and identification skills and identification points and so on. So we're going to kind of just talk a little bit about how things have changed and different things that you can find from these species, and in particular separating black-poll warbler and pine warbler. These are cast often as the confusing fall warblers, as one of those really confusing pairs that you want to be able to identify. And we're going to talk about tail patterns, we're going to talk about wing bars, and we're going to talk about facial patterns. So we're going to spend some time looking at these birds and see what we can learn from what subtleties, or not even so much subtleties, can use for identifying these two species. Also, just very briefly, we're going to talk a little bit about a new system we have for vocalization ID. And we talked about this at noon, so we aren't going to talk too much about it today, but are any of you here this noon? I think at least one or two people were. So unfortunately, we're going to do our little sing-along again, but please feel free to sing along with us this time. But the reason we decided we needed to have a new system of vocalization ID is because the old one doesn't really work very well. Transliterations are basically taking vowels and consonants and trying to make a bird sound out of those, like tweed, tweed, or whatever. And they actually work incredibly well if you know what the song is and if you make them yourself. So if you know the song and you create that transliteration itself, it can be sometimes useful. But generally speaking, they're really not helpful in entering the vocalization ID process. And to prove that, we're going to show you a bunch of transliterations, each one from a different field guide. And we want you to try and guess what the species are and how many species, okay? So you get a big prize if you weren't here.
You can tell us which species you get extra bonus credit for this.
Yeah.
In fact, today we had Cornell staff here, and nobody got it, right? So this is a tough one. We'll
Some
give you a
people
big
may be
prize if
mumbling,
you
but
get it. Yeah.
okay, Scott, so why don't you take, and this is a sing-along.
Okay.
So you may have some personal information that you can contribute to how these work too. So if you want to just chime in with your best vocals, that would be great.
Please do, yeah. Okay, so starting here, relatively low pitched, okay. Lazy, zoooo, zoo, zeedle, zee, twip.
Okay, we got that
What do
one.
you got for that?
Bzz 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 Zee tip tip.
That's very good. Zeedle, 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 zooee, zip.
You put a lot into that one. So
I like that,
I
yeah, I
don't
like
think
that.
you've ever done that quite as well. All right, next one. Series of 5 buzzy lisping notes, second lower in pitch in the first and last 3 higher but descending slightly. So we got that? Okay.
Yeah, right, you'll know it as soon as you hear it. Somewhat variable, starts with a few twittering notes. So we like to say that, you know, each of these you're trying to figure out what species it is. This one you're trying to figure out what species it's not, because that's basically every bird.
Series of about 4 notes, the second lowest in pitch. Now, I really like this one because I can picture that. I can see, all right, 4 notes, the second lowest in pitch. The problem is, it's not correct for the species. It's not accurate, but it's getting somewhere. I mean, I can start to be able to translate that anyway.
It's detailed but wrong.
Yeah.
Z, zoo, z, or bzz bzz Bzz. And actually, this is a good one for this or, and we'll tell you why in just a minute. But that just remember that little.
Yeah, that's one of the most
separator.
important pieces of information that we have here. Okay, and the set of rising, modulated, but sweet zoooo notes. So I don't know how to do a sweet zoooo. Is anyone, any volunteers for a zoooo that's sweet? Okay. Maybe eat a candy bar and then sing it, I'm not sure. With higher, thin zoooo flourish at close.
Bzz 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 Bzz-a-wee?
Okay, I think you missed a buzz.
Oh, sorry. Bzz 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 Bzz-a-wee, right?
Yes.
Totally different species, sorry.
Yes. Tuya, tuya, tweezy. These are not planned, by the way, these things. These just happen.
Series of buzzy sounds on roughly 2 pitches.
Okay.
You know, a little detail there.
The roughly throws me off, though.
The roughly 2 pitches is not
Yeah.
exactly. I'm not sure what roughly 2 pitches means.
Okay, ascending zeedi, sidey z.
Nice. That's a good one, actually. Dropping then rising z, zoo, zeedi, z.
Okay, not too bad. Buzzing, do 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 z.
I don't know how we suddenly got to the D's in here. It doesn't make any sense to me. Zo, zoo, zoo, zo, zoos, ray, z.
Yeah, that accent is important in the end.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the last of them. So that's all the singing you're going to get tonight, unfortunately. Greg's intro notwithstanding, no more singing here. So, how many species do you think we're looking at here? Any guesses? 10 species, 5 species? 1 species, yes. I guess that's pretty obvious, right?
Smart for us, yeah.
We would have to do that anyway, just to make. So that's all 1 species of vocalization. Any guesses on which one it is? Good guess, very good guess.
Very good
Black-footed green, there were some guesses at noon about that as well. It's in the same group of birds, so yes, and you got that from the buzzy and the different pitches.
Right.
So yeah, that's a really good guess.
Yeah.
We made it slightly harder than that. It's actually this species.
Golden cheek warbler, specialty of the Texas Hill Country, and this is the parent bird, and actually it's feeding the baby bird down there. Yeah.
We didn't get an
We got
At noon, there were no ahs at all. We were like, we're definitely in academia here. We're getting no emotional input.
That's impressive.
So let me play the songs. And this species has 2 distinctly different song forms, which we'll talk a little bit more in a second, just as an example. But that's why that or was important. Because the or said, is this or this? So at least it's telling us it's doing possibly two different things.
But that's the only one out of all those books that actually tells you there's 2 types. So imagine if the idea from that right with math. That's what they're doing by not showing you that second form.
So here goes the songs here. Is that a little loud? That's the first song form? Okay, second song form. So you can see a little bit of a relationship to some of those transliterations, but not a lot. So we'll talk more about that in a second. What we tried to do in the Warbler Guide is establish an objective system of vocals, discussing vocalizations, let's say. So we try to make a language where we can talk about things that will mean the same thing to everyone in the room. For example, if I say it does 3 things, and it does 1 thing lower, and then it does 2 things higher, that kind of means the same thing to everyone. I'm not saying how much lower or how much higher, I'm just saying there's a shape going on here that can be important. Or it's a bunch of notes that are all rising. So that's pretty clear to everyone. And we only actually define a few terms for this. It's not a very complex system. But it gives us the opportunity to really talk about what's going on with these vocalizations. And we'll show you a couple examples of that in a minute. These objective criteria make it much easier to differentiate similar species. So if two things sound kind of the same, if we can talk about what's going on in this one, what's going on in this one, and what the differences are, then it becomes much easier to hear that in the field. It's kind of like the sparrow.
Yeah, I mean, what we're doing here is essentially establishing a vocabulary. And I think that's actually the first and in some ways the most important step in learning the difference between things, is to have a way to describe why they're different. And up to this point, we really haven't had a very good standardized vocabulary for that. So that's something we're trying to offer in the book, is a way to say this song is different from this song in this specific way. So a great analogy would be if you're looking at sparrows, for example. When you first start with sparrows, you might look at them all and say, well, they're all just little brown birds. I don't know how you tell these things apart. But maybe somebody then says, well, look at the supercilium. You know, there's that eyebrow there on that bird. And that other bird actually doesn't really have that. Now you start to look very specifically for things in the bird that you might not have noticed just by casually looking, but now you have a vocabulary that you're using and applying to the bird, and that helps you start to differentiate them. And as you build up those vocabulary words, and therefore look more closely at the bird, those birds actually start to look really different from each other. Or not, I know sparrows can be tricky, but that is the idea, and I think that's what we're trying to do here with sounds.
And they also help with memorization. And we're going to talk a little bit about memorization in a minute. Just different techniques for memorizing songs also. But, anyway, so here are our golden cheek warblers. And in order to discuss songs, we need to have a visual way of representing these songs. So we use sonograms, or audio spectrograms. And that gives us, it's a little bit like music notation, but it gives you more information than that actually, because you can see things about timbre, like this is a buzzy sound with lots of pitches at once, or a clear sound. Here are a bunch of buzzy sounds, and a clear sound, which actually is diagnostic or close to diagnostic for the species. A number of rising buzzy sounds with the last one longer, and then a clear sound only is only shared by basically this species and some small variants of another species. So just knowing buzzy, 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 clear is all you may need to know for one particular species. And the language and the sort of sonograms give us a way of pointing this stuff out and just talking about it. And hopefully then we'll focus your vision, or in this case your ears, on what it is to listen for these different vocalizations.
So we're giving you a vocabulary, and we're giving you images of the sound. So we're basically taking what's out there now, which is, imagine again, just to keep harping on the Sibley guide, but imagine if you were using that guide or any other guide, and what you had was a book with no illustrations and kind of cruddy short descriptions of each bird. And that's what you're trying to go out in the field and figure birds apart, figure out what species you're looking at. That's essentially what we're trying to do when we're using just transliterations for birds. So now we're providing the actual image of the sound, which can be a huge help in figuring out what the sound actually, all the details of the sound, and the vocabulary at the same time. So hopefully that will make the process a lot more effective and easier.
Scott, you want to follow along the sonograms? I'll play these songs and you can kind of see how the sonogram fits the sound. That's the first song. You can hear it's very buzzy and then it gets clear at the end. Here's another, the other song. So you can kind of see it's pretty easy to follow these along, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute. Many of you use sonograms now? Many of you used those in the past? So a few people. Okay.
You get used to it pretty fast if you listen to a song and look at them. It gets pretty clear how to read them.
Right.
Pretty fast.
Okay, so what we're going to do today in the talk is we're going to give you a quick outline of the Warbler Guide, just a very quick overview of the book, and some of the new features of the book. And then we're going to talk about these overlooked plumage ID points. And if we have time, we'll talk some about the vocalization studies. I don't know what time we're supposed to be done here, but is there a hook that comes out about 9 or 8:30 or 8:45? Okay. Okay. So anyway, so let's get started.
So let's go through a quick review of the book. This is the book. Right,
Okay, that's
and,
it.
this is a book, and this is the cover. Inside's much more interesting. Here is the face quick finder. So the finders are actually a really important part of our book. They're a part of a two-step process that we've created for a rapid and confident identification of a bird. So the first step is to go to the finder and look for a bird that looks like what your interested in. So you say, well, the bird that I'm trying to identify looks something like this. And you'll see underneath there's actually a name and a page number under each bird. You don't have to figure out exactly which bird it is from the finder. You just have to get, in the ballpark range. The next thing that happens is you actually go to the species accounts. And the species accounts make up a large part of the book, and they go over each species in detail. They have the bird from 3 different angles, again, because these bottom angles are actually really important, like the underside view, and we have important ID information with them. But within each species account, we have comparison pages. So that's the page you want right now. Because what it does is you go to the bird that you thought it was in the finder, and then you have all the birds that you might have confused that with on one page. So now you can say, well, I was right. That's exactly what bird it was, because and for these reasons, here's all the details of why they're different from these other birds. Or, oh no, I made a mistake. It was actually this bird. And now you have a confident idea on that bird. So it gives you both, hopefully, some speed, but also confidence in your identification.
And one of the most important reasons that we put these comparison species on each species page is to protect the book. And the reason I'm saying that is, picture yourself, let's say you're going to Costa Rica, and you want to study the birds of Costa Rica, and you take a look at an ant wren or something, and you're looking at it, wing bars, blah, 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 blah. You go, I think I understand how to identify that, but in the back of your mind you're going, I wonder if there's another bird that looks like that. So you start to look through the book and you're like, uh-oh, here's one that's very similar, I can't figure it out. You fold the page down, you write notes, must look at foot color, or has a plume, or something that you hadn't noticed before, and pretty soon the book's getting all bent up, and you got all this writing on it. So we put this right together so you wouldn't destroy the book. That's
And along those same lines, actually, the finders which we were just showing, actually, and I think the next slide is more finders.
Yeah.
We have the finders from different angles. So we have face, side, 45, underside, and so you can do it from whatever angle you're seeing the bird at. We've actually put these on our website for free download. And so you can actually go on the warblerguide.com and just click and download them, print them out, put them in your pocket, carry them in the field, so you don't have to tear them out of the guide and carry them around with you like we used to do with the old Peterson guide with the Undertail plates. And we actually, those have been extremely popular. We put them up on Princeton's website, and that night they actually crashed the server with about 2,000 downloads. And we're now up to about over 50,000 downloads of those finders. So they've been hopefully very useful.
They can be helpful.
These are our Undertail page again. And just to go back a little more detail in the species accounts, again, showing you the 3 angles. We have these cool icons at the top. The silhouette of the bird, so you can compare shape a little. Color impression icon. One of the things about a Warbler ID is you're often getting partial or quick glimpses of birds. You're not necessarily getting a long look at a bird. And the color impression can sometimes actually help you ID a bird, even if you just get a flash of it. So if you catch, for example, here, this orange head with this black back, and you see that pattern, you're actually pretty close to knowing that's Blackburnian Warbler. So that can be very useful. Undertail icon repeated there. And we also have the range and the preferred habitat. So for Blackburnian Warbler, you're often going to find them in mid to upper canopy. That varies a little bit on migration. They say birds will do anything during migration, but as a rule, they're going to prefer that.
The color impression is really useful. I've found, like when you're in flocks, especially in the fall, there's like lots of yellow rumps flying around, and you start to develop these search maps for these different color impressions. So all of a sudden, a bay-breasted warbler goes by, or some other species, and you've kind of developed some sense of how that color pattern is different, and it can help you say, I need to go find that bird. You might not know exactly what it was, but you know that it's different than that color impression if you start to look at birds from that perspective.
That's right. And on the adjacent page to the species, in the same species account, we have actually additional photos. So this really fleshes out what the bird looks like in the field for you. Hopefully gives you more behavioral information, other secondary ID points. And we also have these distinctive views. And again, working with this idea that you can actually use those partial views and they can be effective ID tools. These views actually for Blackburnian Warbler are all essentially diagnostic for the bird. This one is basically diagnostic. But that view, that view, that view, if you see just that little piece of information, you actually know it's black-burning warbler for sure, no question. So if you see, like, for example, those two white braces on a black back, always black-burning warbler. So one of the things our book is doing is because it's using these other angles, is it's starting to give you some, show you that you can use these other views of the bird effectively, just as effectively as that side view. Another interesting thing here too, by the way, is our use of museum trays. We found that for some birds, we really want to show variation, and traditional guides have a hard time doing that because they have limited illustration space. But we can show you, for example, here with Blackburnian, this wide range of orange that you can see in the throat. And so if you see Blackburnian warbler in the field and you're like, well, that looks like it, but it looks too pale. I wonder if they get that pale. Well, yes, they do, and we show you that.
Yeah, we've seen that in the field a lot where you're guiding a group and someone spots a Blackburnian warbler or something similar, and they're like, it has all these characteristics, but it's just way too pale. It couldn't possibly be this pale. And it's because, as Scott mentioned, the field guide can't present you with all those views. So in one shot, we can give you the complete gamut of how very pale or how very, rich it is or whatever. And I also think these distinctive views are really important. To me, the distinctive views are our call to you to study the bird after you know what it is. So once you've identified a black-burning warbler, maybe using some of these ID points, maybe some of these diagnostic points or whatever, then what you want to do is start to build your personal database of that bird. And it's these other views that are going to make you a faster, better birder, because you don't have to sit there and wait for the bird to show up sideways, for example, or the ID points you're used to looking for, which we'll talk more about in a minute. But it's really to say, now's the time to study this bird. What else can I see about this bird? From below, what does it have? From the side, what does it have? From the back, what does it have? How can I sort of develop more knowledge of that bird and its plumage?
And hopefully the guide will help confirm your field experience. So for example, if you were to notice on Blackburnian in the field, oh, look, it's got those white braces, I wonder if that's useful. Hopefully our book will help confirm, yes, that's useful, definitely, that's a good point. And it's not that you need to memorize every little tiny view of the bird, although we'd like you to do that, and we will be coming to your houses to quiz you about it. But we actually just want you to gradually realize that you can keep gleaning information. Don't shut off the ID process as soon as you see the bird and say, okay, that's Blackburnian, okay, I'm done, on to the next thing. Unless there's a Kalima warbler right next to it, then you can throw it away and go to the Kalima. But keep looking, is what we're trying to say.
Right.
And another facet of the species accounts is that if we have a bird in a different plumage and a different appearing bird, we treat it separately. So this is a drab plumage Blackburnian, and we give it a whole nother species account with all different, with some at least different ID points. And again, the comparison species are a really critical part of the book, I think, in terms of giving you a confident ID through comparison. Here's another really cool thing in the book, aging and sexing. And so this is the first time it's been presented, especially in a visual format in a complete way. We actually have pictures of each of the ages and sexes that you can separate for the bird. So aging and sexing is where you want to try and figure out if it's male or female, if it's a young bird or if it's an adult bird. And there are different mechanisms by which you can do that. But traditionally, that whole process has been done primarily by banders. So they hold the bird in their hand, when they're bird banding, and they're putting a little band on the bird's leg, and they're taking measurements and so forth. And so it's based more on things like wing chord and retro shape and other sort of things where you really need to be able to, look and measure the bird. So we really focus more on what you can actually see with binoculars and maybe a camera and document and look at. And it's, again, I think a great way, once you know what the bird is, to pay more attention to the bird, because now you really are looking for, oh, look at this, there's a molt limit here, or there's a little change in the feather here, and that will actually tell you maybe sometimes if it's a young bird or an adult bird. So it's a very useful section. These are the maps, and a couple of just quick things about the maps. One thing is we have South America in there, which is hopefully a practice. I know Cornell does it on their site, but for warbler guides, actually, there's only one other guide that does this, where it shows you the whole migration route of the bird. Because I always wonder, where is the bird actually in winter? And I like this because it gives you the more global sense, and it has, I think, some ramifications in terms of preservation and We have our migration bars here, and they actually tell you when the peak of migration is for that species and how protracted it is. Is it a 2-week window when those birds all come through, which is true for some birds, do they come through early or late? Or is it a 8-week window where they're sort of around for almost the whole migration period?
So, song finders. So let me talk about this for a second. Part of what we did with the book from the very beginning was to look at the identification process and say, how do you identify a bird that you haven't seen before, you don't know? How do you get into that process? And one of the ways we did that is, as Scott mentioned and we mentioned before, with the visual finders. So you go through the visual finders, it helps you sort down to 1 or 2 species. Then you go to the species account and there are all the comparison species. So it gives you a chance to have a very confident ID. We wanted to do the same thing for songs. If you hear a bird singing and you don't know what it is, a warbler singing, how do you identify that? And the song finder is our way of asking a couple of questions that will help you narrow down that, sometimes to 1 species or 2 or 3 species. So, and if we have time, we'll talk about the song finders in more detail towards the end. But I think this is a really important thing because vocalizations are one of the most important ways that people find birds, warblers especially. And, but there hasn't really been a path into that identification that was easy to use. So we're trying to perfect that process. It also allows us to do, well, in the book we have call finders like chip or contact call finders, flight call finders. This is the first time this stuff has all been presented in a comprehensive way also.
How many people here are comfortable or familiar with chip and flight calls? Is it a new concept for some? Tom, we say vocalizations a lot instead of songs because there is the bird song, which the males do, almost always males do in the spring. And then there are these chip and flight calls, which are these really short little sounds that they make all the time. And what's cool about chip and flight calls is they do them year-round, and males and females both do them. So in some ways, they're actually more useful than song when you're trying to, especially locate birds, and often to ID birds, you can actually use these little chips to ID them.
And I would offer a challenge. Any of you have iTunes or some kind of MP3 player program on your phone or on your computer? I would challenge you to take 4 calls. Common yellowthroat, redstart, let's see, what else? Yellow warbler maybe, and
Yellow rump.
yeah, those are good choices. Put those in a playlist and listen to them once a day, every day for a while. And what's going to happen is you're going to start to be able to hear what the differences are in those very short vocalizations. And as you do that, all of a sudden you're going to become much more sensitive to those short vocalizations in the field. Because you're going to start to notice them because they're everywhere, especially in the fall, as Scott mentioned. But even in the spring, there are lots of calling going on. And then as you start to be able to separate those, and sort of we give you hints about what to listen for and so on about these calls. But as you do that, you won't necessarily learn how to identify all contact calls. But what you will do is develop a sensitivity to those calls. So then you can start to say, well, I've been hearing this yellow rump thing a lot, and all of a sudden I heard something that's totally different. Let's just go find what that is. So maybe there's a Canada warbler over here calling, or maybe it's some other species. Calling is also useful for song identification. Some species, like the Virens group or Blackburnian warbler, call a lot when they're singing. Some species never call when they're singing, like cerulean warbler. So cerulean warbler I've seen mistaken for Blackburnian warbler, and Blackburnian warbler is going and then call, and then the song, which I won't try and sing now, I promised. But as opposed to cerulean, which never does that. So there's no possible way that you can confuse those two if you're hearing that. So awareness of calls, I think, is really, really important.
And I would ask you to do one other thing in addition to that is to ask yourself 4 questions when you listen to that. So when you listen to each of those 4 chip calls, think to yourself, is it rising or falling or flat? Is it buzzy or clear? Is it short or long, or is it high or low? And do that every time because, again, having that vocabulary when you're listening really helps you listen and hear the details of something. And so so listen carefully in that way.
Yeah, it it just focuses your hearing. And there actually have been studies now, we were talking about this earlier, that have shown that listening to very short sounds of whatever kind, usually they use phonemes and so on, but stem off age-related hearing loss. So people actually focusing on these short sounds, there's an added benefit, which is it helps keep your hearing more acute, I think. So, anyway, that's our plea for the for calls. And then, of course, for the songs, we have sonograms for all the types of calls for that species. So, like Burning Warbler has 3 basic types of songs, and we talk about those and what to listen for in them, and so on and so forth. And we show the calls, and we give you a mnemonic, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then, right next to it, we have the similar species. So you think it's a Blackburnian, but maybe it's something else. Well, what do you need to listen for? And then we say, all right, if it's cerulean, listen for this, 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 and this. And then you'll be able to tell which it is. So again, trying to give you confidence in that identification process. In the visual side, it's the visual features of the similar species. In this, it's the audio, the songs and vocalizations. So I think it's very, very helpful.
And this is the our website, thewarblerguide.com, and we have here actually a song called Companion. And this is a downloadable link that's actually hosted here at Cornell. And you can click on there and download every vocalization and audio sound in the book, all in book order. It's around 1,100 sounds, and it's a hugely valuable augmentation for the book. So I highly recommend it if you have the book and you want to learn songs. If you have that, you can put it in a playlist on iTunes or any other MP3 player, audio player, and we actually show you the sonogram there in the album art, and you can play along as you're working through the songs there. You can also pick out, all the flight calls or all the chip calls or whatever you want to learn.
Yeah, very, very helpful, and we really grateful to Cornell partnering with us on this project.
Just a couple other odds and ends here in the book. We have flight shots, which we couldn't stand not to include because they're so hard to get, and we worked really hard in Cape May to get them. Has anyone here been to Cape May? So if you guys know about morning flight, we have the warblers fly by in the fall doing this sort of weird flight by a little hill that we have there called the dike.
Do any of you have flight shots that we could take a look at?
Yeah, can you buy flight shots because these are hard to get. These are about one every 1,000 you get a good one.
1,000.
And so we actually have a surprising number. We actually have most of the species in flight in the book. So that's the first time anybody's had that published, which is kind of cool. We also have the similar non-warbler species section, and because the first question, of course, is it a warbler? And this answer sometimes is no, it is not, because perhaps it's a yellow-throated vireo, which is a classic confusion for pine warbler. Maybe it's red-eyed vireo, which is a classic confusion for Tennessee. So we include that also. And then we have this great taxonomy chart, which also comes from Cornell, from Dr. Irby Levitt. We have a DNA-based warbler taxonomy here that shows you actually the speciation of warblers, starting with the oldest warbler. This is the warbler from which all other warblers speciated. And does anyone know what warbler that is?
The oldest warbler species?
It's ovenbird.
Does anyone know why it's the ovenbird? Because without the ovens, they couldn't cook the food for all the other warblers, so it had to come first.
So we
I've never gotten hissing from that.
Yes.
Ooh, yes. Hissing, yeah, this is
We have
tough.
about 100 extra pages in the book that we cut, and about 3/4 were Tom jokes.
Yeah, yeah. However, we're going to talk about memory and how to memorize things, and this is an example of an image that will connect to something you want to remember. In this case, what's the oldest warbler? So we're going to talk more about that process in a minute, but thinking about the ovenbird, it's the oldest warbler because he had to have the oven. So that's an example of a mnemonic image that can really help you memorize a particular fact. And we'll talk about it in relation to song in a minute, but
If you really want to bump that up too, if you picture the ovenbird with its wings sort of reaching in and getting sticky, pulling out the pizza bread or whatever you're baking in there, maybe the orange crown on its head gets burned by the heat from the oven. If you start to build up that image and really picture it in your head, this is going to be unfortunately for you, it's going to be very hard to get it out of your head. But it's a very useful tool there. So we're gonna quiz you on that actually. So what's the oldest warbler?
And why? You need to repeat that image too when you're doing that reinforcement. Okay, we'll talk more about that in a minute.
And then we have the section called What to Notice on a Warbler. Again, the same theme of we really want people to look closely at these birds because you can find all kinds of ID treasures if you do that. And one of these pages, for example, focuses on the idea of contrast, you know, the overall contrast of color or tone. We talk about wing bars, we talk about undertail. We really go through all these different features of the bird sort of step by step, so you really can see all the different things that you could potentially see on a bird that could be useful.
Yeah, how do you train your eye to get better at looking at warblers, for example? So now we'd like to jump to some often overlooked plumage points. Any questions so far? We're happy to take questions throughout, by the way, if something occurs to you, but otherwise we'll just keep rolling ahead here. And no questions from our online listeners yet either. Okay, so.
So here we have this interesting image. This was in Ohio. This was early morning, and it was in the fall last year. And we had a group, and we had seen a number of blackpoll warblers. And then we had this bird, and we were looking up there and saying, well, I wonder, it could be blackpoll, it could be something else. It's really kind of hard to tell. You have very little information, right? Because it's low light, it was high up, and that's all we were getting. So the question is, can we use this image or this information to, you know, solve the problem? What bird is this?
So what we're going to do is we're going to jump back to these plates now, and this is called the "we're going to let you off the hook" part of the talk. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at how to separate blackpoll and pine warbler using 3 different types of ID criteria. And the first one is going to be the tail. So describe to me the difference between these tails. Which has a longer tail? Blackpoll looks like a lot longer. Any other differences? A lot of white here. This tail looks flat and that looks forked. That difference. Any other differences? I mean, they look somewhat similar, but they look kind of different too. Maybe I could use that ID point. So now let's take a look at the real birds. This is the undertail of the blackpoll warbler. Notice there is a very short extension of that tail beyond the undertail covers. Like really short, like, you know, almost, you know, nub-like. Stubby. This is the pine warbler. See the difference in the extension there of the tail beyond the wings and beyond the undertail covers. Very, very different. So different that it's almost impossible to confuse these 2 species from below, which is one of the easiest ways of separating them. Let's take a look at some more shots. So here's pine warbler. Look at the tail extension. Pine warbler, blackpoll warbler, blackpoll warbler.
So don't get distracted by the bird here. Just look at the tail.
Just look at shape.
Just for our purposes right now.
Right. Does that seem like a pretty clear difference? So that's number 1 ID point that we want to emphasize then.
Another interesting point about these actually is that because the pine warbler has such a long tail, it often tends to hold it slightly loosely, and it can have this sort of forked appearance, whereas the blackpoll actually tends to have a more square-looking tail. So it's actually reversed from what we saw in the illustration.
Yeah. Yeah, this loosely held long tail, because it's so long, it just kind of flops a little bit and has this sort of jizz of this sort of floppy forked tail that actually can be very useful when you're picking a bird out high up. Okay, next let's talk about wing bars. So how would you describe the differences here in these wing bars? They look pretty similar. This looks whiter maybe, a little whiter than that. This feathering looks similar, maybe that's a little less dark. A little bit of difference here. Okay, so let's dive into this. First of all, I want to talk about wing bars for a second. Many of you have seen books where it goes warblers with wing bars, warblers without wing bars. And by wing bars, they mean 2 white stripes. So in other words, contrasting white stripes, and some birds have them and some warblers don't. And right now, what I want to say is throw all that out. Because what's important is to look closely at whatever pattern there is in that part of the bird, in the coverts. For example, This is a diagnostic view of this species. You don't need to see anything but that to identify this palm warbler. So this is a sort of light buffy tips to brown feathers. No other warbler has that pattern at all. Now, does that have a wing bar? I don't know. It might not make the cut to wing bars because it doesn't have those two white lines. But it still has incredibly important information. Another diagnostic sort of side viewing pattern with the yellow edging and the yellow edges of these feathers very closely. Another diagnostic pattern. Yeah, yellow warbler. This is a prairie warbler. Prairie warbler has these sort of brown feather bases, olivey brown, with very yellow tips. Diagnostic for that species. So we're encouraging you now to throw out completely the concept of wing bars and just use that as an area to study and then see what you can find. So now let's go to our species in question. This is the blackpoll. So what do you see in this wing? Well, it's got fairly white tips to the covers, right? But it has really black bases to those feathers. So the black bases of this feather contrast a lot with this white. That's the most important part of this. Here's your pine warbler. The white is actually maybe brighter white or maybe not, I don't know. But the contrast is very low because the base of the feathers is pale. It's pale gray. So this difference in contrast, and of course it works also with the rest of the bird. This is more dark olive and so on. But that area, the low contrast in that area versus the high contrast is a very useful ID point for these two species. So again, not thinking wing bars. Here you just go, yeah, it has wing bars, okay, now let's look at the next ID point. Well, in fact, no. Look at the wing bars and see, all right, what are the bases of these feathers? And how do they contrast with the tips? And all of a sudden you've got a really useful piece of information. This species, this is a different species, even more contrasty than blackpoll, partly because the body colors are lighted. There's kind of a greeny yellow color instead of this sort of olivey brown color. And the base of these feathers is super black with white tips. This is a bay-breasted warbler in the fall. Many times I've been looking at a flock of birds and then I see this flash of super contrasty, it's like just this wing bar flies by, nothing else. And you go, there's a bay-breasted over here, we gotta go over and look for that. So that sensitivity to sort of the overall contrast and pattern in that part of the bird, of warbler, can be really, really useful and helpful. So throw out the concept of wing bars and study that area in the bird and you're gonna find a lot more ID points.
So like Tom was saying, I mean, we have here the so-called three using fall warblers in fall plumage, and all three of them have wing bars. So if you're just thinking in that term, well then they're all the same. But these are actually all totally separable just by looking at that area.
Make sense? Okay. We don't have, I think we're gonna jump over this section. But basically there's some differences also in the contrast between these tertials here, this edging and this white tips on the flight feathers versus very low contrast and no white tips. So that's
I want to show
another.
my favorite slide though. I think that's the
Oh.
next one.
Yeah.
Yes. So this is
Scott's
cool.
favorite
I
side.
like this one because it shows the open wing of black and white warbler and also shows the closed wing, and it shows you how the flight feathers are connected between open and closed, right? So in the open wing you have primaries, secondaries, and tertials, right? The tertials are these inner flight feathers, but then when the wing folds, the tertials actually wind up on top and actually sort of protect the other flight feathers. The flight feathers are all these feathers here that the bird flies with. And so, and then you have the secondaries and the primaries.
That's nerdy. Okay. So we'll skip that. Okay, the last ID point here is the facial patterns. So how would you describe the difference in these facial patterns? Okay. The eyebrow or the supercilium. This is kind of thin here in front. It kind of extends far in the back. Here it's sort of stronger and sort of equally divided on either side of the eye, right? There's not a lot going on there. I mean, the eye line is equal on both sides of the eye, more or less equal. Those would be hard to separate, I would think, because they look kind of similar. Do you agree? Or?
And it would also be hard to be confident about it. You might look at those two and say,
Right.
well,
Good
I don't know if that's a real difference or if that's just sort of a subtlety of the play.
Right, yeah. Okay, so let's take a look at some real birds. Here's a pine warbler. Notice several things. One, very, very contrasting supraloral area. So that's the area that if there were a full eyebrow would be in front of the eye. And below that is this very dark contrasting loral area, which is the area in front of the eye, that makes this a very contrasting area. Not only that, there's a lot of contrast between this cheek patch and the throat. And there's no eyeline here or supercilium behind the eye at all. None. Let's take a look at another one. Dark in front, light above that, nothing much going on behind there, a lot of contrast here. Light in front, dark lowers, nothing much behind the eye, pretty strong contrast, not as strong as these, but still very light throat, very dark cheek. Another one, light, dark lowers, nothing really behind the eye, and this really strong contrast pattern.
And these are almost, sometimes when you see this in the field, it almost looks like headlights. You got these two bright spots in front of the eyes.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's take a look at black hole. All right, first of all, we have this very thin, evenly divided eye line on both sides of the eye. So very different than what we saw before. And maybe it's a little lighter here, but the supercilium continues on beyond the eye, so it really doesn't contrast as much with the rest of the head. And this pattern is very diffuse. Almost no contrast there at all. This is like the difference between yellow-bellied flycatcher and willow flycatcher, or this sort of malar region is really different in this group. Here we go again. Long eye line going on both sides of the eye. This, not much going on in terms of the supercilium at all here. Almost no contrast, right? And here's the pine warbler again. Really bright, nothing back here, very dark here, and strong contrast in the cheek to the throat. So these really are not that hard to separate based on facial pattern. But you really have to, pay attention to these sort of different details and so on. Yes, question?
You gotta have a pretty super scope to be even noticing all these birds that don't know.
That's true, yeah. We use a spray, slows them down. It's a cold spray. But the thing is,
Just wanted to tell you guys, when we get a question from the audience, if you could please try to repeat it.
oh yes, good
so
point.
we can hear it.
So the question was, it wasn't really a question, it was more a statement. You have to have an incredibly good scope to see those views of these birds jumping around. And our answer was we use a spray, a slow down spray. But actually, because warblers are moving a lot, that's why it's even more important to assemble all these distinctive views and all these different ID mechanisms. It's not just the cap of the Wilson's warbler. That's one of the obvious things for the male, adult, or whatever. But what else do we have? Well, we have this very diagnostic tail pattern. We have all these other things. So in order to become better at your identification of warblers, you need to assemble this toolkit of all these other ID points.
And you don't need much of a look. I mean, if you even get the slightest glimpse of this and you know this difference, that's all you need. You really don't have to see it for more than a second. But it's like Tom's saying, it's not about just having this, but having this and the tail and the wing bar and all those things. So no matter what the bird is doing, you can hopefully make something out of what you're looking at.
Yes, question?
You made a point early on talking about variation within a particular species. But with some of these diagnostic characters like the coverts that seem relatively subtle, how much variation is there, and is there overlap between them?
That's a good question. I would say, the question is there much overlap between some of these more subtle characteristics? Are they really diagnostic all the time? And the answer is it depends on which one. For example, the wing bars, I've seen pine warblers that are on the border of being contrasty enough so I wouldn't use that ID point for them. But generally, 99% of the time, that black hole is a roaring contrast, and the pine warbler is very diffuse. That's one of the reasons we show several different pictures of the birds too, to kind of give you some idea that way. But if you're looking closely, like to take this pine warbler, if you're looking at these pine warblers, that is not as contrasty as that, because some pine warblers are very drab. But you can still see it definitely has a strong cheek contrast. It definitely has that lighter area with the dark laurel. There's not much going on behind the eye. That's quite consistent.
And I would say, for example, those wing bars between blackpoll and bay breasted is, in my experience, is basically 100%.
It's pretty strong,
useful.
yeah. Yeah.
But with a bird like this, we're actually doing traditionally what would be considered the most difficult trio of fall birds right now, right?
Right.
So,
And we're trying to let you off the hook, as I said earlier, because the field guide wasn't helping you that much on those points. So you can feel good about, having problems with these. And why are they called confusing? Well, one of the reasons is, some of these ID points have not been really talked about too much.
but that's another reason I was gonna say is having more than one ID point is useful too, because then it can at least get you going towards, well, I got that really contrasting wing bar, I think that's big rest, and then you look for a couple other things on it
Right,
just to make sure.
right.
Yeah.
Yes, question?
Your book get into variation in color from fall to spring?
Oh, sure, yeah. So the question is, does our book get into the variation between color between fall and spring? Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we treat fall birds that are drab in completely separately from the spring bird if it's bright. So that means a whole, master species or all three views. It means all new distinctive views. It means all new comparison species. Yeah, that's really important. Yeah.
Yeah, if it looks different, we treat it as.
Yeah, that's key. Yeah. So yeah, for sure. Okay. So of course in our master pages we show all this stuff and the finders and so on. Okay, so we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about vocalizations. And we don't have much time left, so I'm going to sort of skip around here a little bit. Sorry for the broadcast following the PowerPoint here. We already talked a little bit about this sonogram and the objective criteria and so on. So, and to do this, as I mentioned, we use sonograms. And a couple of you said you were using sonograms now, but sonograms are basically just a picture of the sound. It gives you a lot of information like volume, timbre, rhythm, structure, all these things. And it allows us to talk about it too. We can point to things with this rather than just try to say, well, look at the third note from the left and blah, blah, blah. No, we can say, here it is. And you can listen to it on the call companion and the download companion here. Okay, so I'm going to continue right on through this. Well, here's a sonogram here. So you can see it really follows along. Yeah, it's pretty easy. I mean, it's a direct translation of that sound to a visual format. So that they're quite useful. And they help you see this structure and aid you in comparing elements and so on and so forth. And as I mentioned before, they can help with the memory as well. So the song finders, how do the song finders work? So we're going to take a sound. Well, actually, we talked about this before, and we'll continue on. So using the song finders, we talk about four things, basically. There are four questions to ask if you're hearing a warbler singing and you don't know what it is. Basically, usually just three, but sometimes a fourth one. So one is the song quality. What's the quality of the song? Is it buzzy? Is it a trill? Is it clear? Those are basically those three categories. What's the pitch profile? Is it rising? Is it falling? Is it steady? Or is it variable, other than that? And song structure. Is it doing one thing? Basically just one thing? Or does it do one thing and then do something else? Or maybe one thing, something else, and then a third thing. So what is the structure of the song? And then phrase and element structure we'll talk about another lecture. We're going to take a look at these questions now for this song. So this song is Prairie Warbler. It's a buzzy rising song. It's a little hard to hear in this sound system, but that's a buzzy. Okay. So we're going to go to our song finder, and we're going to, under quality, we're going to pick buzzy. Under pitch profile, rising, right? And it's really doing just one thing. It's not doing multiple things, it's just slowly rising. Okay? So in the song finder, here's buzzy, here's rising pitch, and there's one section. And so we can narrow it down quickly to that one species. If you notice, a lot of these groups have only one or two choices. So using this structure and quality and so on, it's often, you can often quickly narrow down to a couple of species. Then you can go to the species account, look at the similar species and so on, just the way you would with a visual finder.
It's a very effective method. It's surprising how fast you can cut down with just a couple of questions.
And this is the species, Prairie Warbler, very handsome bird. Notice these diagnostic wing patterns. This bird's a little messed up. Okay, so here's the sonogram. So buzzy elements are all just slowly rising. All the elements are about the same length, so it's just, it really gives you the impression it's just doing this one thing over and over again.
These fuzzy caterpillars are buzzy where they have the multiple stacked tones over
Right.
each other.
So, what we want to talk about is how would you memorize this song? Let's say you wanted to learn this song. How do you go about that? And we've spent a lot of time looking at this issue. I started doing this mostly when I was going to other countries that I hadn't been to, and I wanted to learn 300 or 400 vocalizations. And unless you have an efficient process, you can never do it, or it'll take you forever. So I started reading about memory theory and what's going on with how you memorize things and so on.
So,
And there you go.
how many, I'm just curious, how many people here have studied Warbler songs? Yeah, okay, so how many people here are totally confident that they can ideally? Okay, good.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, so this system is actually gonna be valuable then, because the method of study is actually really important for that.
Yeah, and it's an efficient system too. So the first thing you have to do if you want to memorize a bunch of songs, and the good news is there aren't that many warbler species. There are only like 52 or whatever. That's nothing. So the first thing you do have to decide you're going to do it. So you're going to say, I'm going to take some time to do this. I want to do this. This is a goal that I really want to accomplish. And the good news is you only need a couple sessions a day of 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes as you get further down the road to do this study. You don't need to listen to things over and over and over again a million times. You don't have to spend a ton of time, getting to know songs. There's really a very simple, time-efficient way of doing it. And the key to this is creating an image that links the sound to the bird's name. So let's talk about memory theory for a second. If you want to remember that you put the car keys on the dining room table, okay, you can put the car keys on the dining room table, and you can say to yourself, I just put the car keys on the dining room table, and that will kind of reinforce that. And then you'll walk away, and you'll forget where they are, but then maybe you'll remember. If you put the car keys on the dining room table, and then you picture yourself jumping up on the table, grabbing the car keys, putting them in a loaf of bread, and then stomping on a loaf of bread, all of a sudden you have a much clearer visual image of that thing you're trying to remember. And the brain loves that. The brain goes crazy with these kind of images and will really retain it. So the first thing is creating some image, something that will link this process to the song name and the song. And we'll do an example in a second.
Specific and dramatic images. So, just a quick question. Does anyone remember what the oldest warbler species is?
That's an example of an image that will help you remember that. Why is it the oven bird? Because of the oven and they had to cook the food. So that is a perfect example of a mnemonic that really can work well. The second thing is almost all the forgetting that happens when you want to remember something happens within the first 10 minutes to an hour, and certainly within the first 24 hours. Lots of research on this. So if you're able to form this image and then walk away, get a drink of water, come back and test yourself with active recall, you will remember that song much, much, much better. And in fact, you don't need to do much of that testing if you do it quickly. So you'll test it once, and maybe that night you'll review it again. If the image comes to you and you recognize the song, you're done. And then the next day you can just review that once every day or two. And that sounds like too easy or whatever, but it's actually the way it is. If you do that testing, and by testing I mean active recall. You can't know what the song is before you hear it. You can't look at it in advance, and you can't memorize the order, so you need it kind of in a random order or whatever. But if you do that with 5 or 6 songs or 7 songs to start with, then you start to develop this repertoire of songs that you know. And literally in the first day or two, you could easily learn 7 songs. We're talking 50 birds, that's how many days? I can't do much math,
I
but
can't do that either.
it's not that
It's,
many
180
days.
days? Yeah. 4
Yeah.
days, I'm not sure.
So,
And the, sorry.
yeah.
So, not only that, but you want to do that. So this is basically the opposite of doing what many of us have done, which is to get some kind of CD or tape that plays the song, and you put it in your car, and you listen to it while you're doing a 3-hour drive, and you start to develop this ability to recognize the song, but you don't link the name to the So then the next time you go out in the field, you hear it and you go, aha, I know that song, but I have no idea what verse that is.
Anybody ever had that experience before?
So that happens a lot, and that certainly happened to me. So this is much less time, in some ways much simpler, and much more effective. It's active instead of passive learning.
So let's take an example. So we're going to use Prairie Warbler as the example. And this is a long rising buzz, okay? So what I did for my image is I pictured a meadow in front of me, like long rising, where I'm walking up meadow one step at a time, all even, up, 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 up. And I sort of conflated meadow with prairie, so I'm thinking wildflowers, prairie, or whatever. And it's buzzing, right? So it's filled with buzzing bees. So there are buzzing bees all around, and I'm walking up this meadow, or this prairie, with all these buzzing bees around. That's enough of an image for me to, hear that song, get that image. So you want the image to come to you when you listen to the song. So rising, buzzy, I'm walking up this hill, or whatever, this prairie. And that's the image that I want.
And that's why it's really important that that image is your own, because it has to be something that comes to you when you hear that song. So you might not see a prairie or bees at all when you hear that. We had someone today who had a giraffe with spots on its neck.
Yeah,
So
it's
he
kind of
pictures
cool.
the sonogram of the even tone going up, which is also really cool. Then you just have to tie the word prairie to it somehow.
Yeah,
Which is not impossible.
but visually that'd be a yellow color with the black, kind of
But
like the
visually, right,
360.
because it's yellow and black like a prairie warbler. For example, I do common yellow throat. I hear, when I hear that song, the standard common yellow throat song, I hear a bicycle wheel that is sort of bent, so it's sort of a little uneven. And so bicycles don't have much to do with common yellow throats, unless that bicycle is being ridden by a man in a bright yellow banana suit wearing a black burglar mask who's stealing the bicycle. Because I know that's what common yellow throats look like, and so now I'm connecting the name to the image. And so that's the kind of thing you do, and it's a crazy image, right? And unfortunately, I now have that stuck in my head, and every time I hear it, it pops into my head. But I know it's common yellow throat.
And if you had a bicycle stolen as a kid, it'll work even better.
I hate those common yellow throats. I was stealing my bicycles.
And I mentioned earlier, a visual image is much better than a textual image or words. So I don't want to just say a prairie, but I want to actually picture the prairie. I want to picture the hill on the side. And I want to picture all these buzzing bees around in my head. And that is going to serve for that image for me. Then I walk away, literally a minute is enough time, but say 2 minutes. And then you come back and say you've done 4 or 5 songs, then you test yourself on those songs. If that image comes back to you and you identify the species, that has developed some strong neuro connections. Maybe review it again that day, and you'll be amazed at how quickly these things start to stick or something.
And this isn't always easy, this visualization process. It's something you certainly gets easier over time, but sometimes you hear a sound and you just draw a blank on it. You can set it aside and come back to it later. But you can almost, when you do it, this is the active part of active learning. You really almost feel it burning that pathway into your brain, etching that into your mind, and then later on it's going to be there for you when you're trying to recall it.
Right. So we're getting close to the end here. I don't know if we have time to do the Yellow Magnolia.
8:45, what's our?
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to jump way ahead here. I'm going to just do one more slide. Get this, get this, get this, get this.
We're going to show you now how to separate two actually very similar songs by using structure. So this is a more kind of advanced case than what we've been talking about so far, but the system still is very effective.
So here are 2 species that sound a lot alike. Magnolia Warbler and the unaccented Yellow Warbler songs. They really do sound very similar. And so how can we separate these songs? There may be ways of talking about quality. For example, you'll see in the Yellow Warbler by looking at the sonogram, there's a lot of pitches going on here at the same time, more than there are in any of these Magnolia. That makes that sound brighter and more energetic, for example. But that's a little subjective. So here's how we're going to separate these songs. If you could do the honors there with the. So that's the Magnolia song. Here it is slow. Okay, so you can see the structure. It does 3 things. and then there's a higher thing, and then a lower thing. So there are 3 different sections in this song. First section, second section, third section, right? Okay? In fact, Magnolia Warbler often does 2 here or maybe 3. But in this second section, it always only does one thing. It never does 2 things ever, only one thing. So if I can count, and I can hear that, I know, okay, there's one thing going on in this second section. Let's listen to Yellow Warbler. There's the Yellow Warbler song. So it's kind of similar to that other song. Does 3 things, but in the second section, it's doing 2 things, and then it's got a final section. It turns out Yellow Warbler will do 3, 4, 5 sometimes in the first section, and it will do 2, 3, or 4 things in that section, but never 1. So it never does only one thing. So if you see a yellow bird singing this song in the bushes somewhere, and you're, I don't know, is it a magnolia, is it yellow? Sounds like both, they sound very similar. You can, if you can count, you can figure out which of those 2 species it is. So that's part of what we're talking about, this objective system. So a system that will mean the same thing to everyone.
And it's not unlike looking at the tail on pine and blackpoll warbler. Again, if you can teach yourself to focus on, and you know that, you can focus yourself on that point and listen to it, you really can hear that very clearly. At first, the songs might sound a little fast and a little hard to pick out, but once you start listening for it in terms of sections, it actually is very doable.
Okay, and this is our website, Marcus. We have to say that. So, any questions about the visual ID or the song and stuff? Yes.
Just, first of all, I'm really impressed, and obviously a lot of work went into it. So how long did it take you? Just from when you decided to do this?
So the question is,
Just want to repeat the question. She's very impressed. And she wants to know, how long did it take us to do this? So I guess our answer is, from start to finish, like from us saying, let's do a book, to actually having a book in our hand, was about 2.5 years.
That's a long
But
time.
in terms of the heavy
That's
lifting,
pretty
believe it or
fast.
not, it was only about 9 months to a year of heavy work. Yeah. There was a lot of design and brainstorming about what we wanted to change from traditional guides and what we thought we needed in the guide. So.
But did you guys do all of the photography and
We
everything?
did about 85% of the photos between the 2 of us, and we did all the design and layout and everything.
the problem with the photos was, it's very hard to go to another photographer, especially a professional photographer, and say, give me the underside shot of a dull, drab fall female. They don't keep those shots. They want beautiful side view, you know, with the cap on the Wilsons or whatever. So we had to do most of it. And we also paid a lot of attention to light. So one of the problems with photo field guides in the past is there's been a disparity between the quality of the images and the light in the images. So our goal, and we worked a lot on this, Scott especially, is keeping that consistency so that when you look from one image to another, your eye doesn't go, wait a minute, you know. So it's all very smooth and similar lighting and so on too. But, yeah, it took some work. Other questions? Any other questions? Yeah.
Actually, 2, one quick, are you coming out with an app?
We are coming out with an app, and the question is, are we coming out with an app? And the answer is yes, and it will be hopefully out soon. We're about halfway through the process right now.
And the second question, which is more complex, how do you determine the difference between a buzz and a partial buzz?
Okay, so actually that's simple. The question is, what's the difference between a buzz and a partial buzz?
Yeah, so a buzz is bzz, a partial buzz is bzz. They're attached together, so they aren't separate things. So bzz would be a partial buzz.
And what we do
So, or if it's a song that's partially buzzy, it'd be bzz, bzz, bzz. There aren't any warblers like
it's
that.
just
but-
mixed. It's mixing.
It's a mixture of the two. And if there's a potential for confusion, we'll put a species in both categories. So, for example, if you think is, like take Northern Perilous. Northern Perilous sings a trill usually when it's that rising zzz, but sometimes it sounds like a buzz from the distance especially. So we put it in the buzzy section and the trill section, just in case. So we're trying to keep it as bulletproof as possible that way. Yeah, but it's pretty intuitive. Once you start to listen to the song, I mean, we haven't we've tried not to do anything very complex with it. And we've tried to make it as accessible and as simplified as we can.
Yeah, in the back.
Couple of questions for our online viewers. Do you consider behavioral clues when you're working with ID more?
So the question is, do we consider behavior clues when working on ID with Warblers? And the answer is absolutely. One of the things we were trying to do in this book is really put into the book what we see real birders in the field doing, you know, when they bird. And behavior is definitely a key component to that. You'll often find that information in our additional photo captions, talking about things. For example, simple example, black and white warbler creeping on a tree trunk and probing for insects is nearly diagnostic actually for that bird. So yeah, absolutely, we think that's really important.
I thought he meant our behavior. Like if you see a caveman, you get really excited, you're jumping around and your ID gets a lot better. I mean, you get much more focused and excited.
Our behavior, I find, is highly variable though. It's hard to
Another question from online, was there?
Yeah, one of the questions from online. We just asked you for one thing to identify, but this person's saying they get confused when they see a warbler, and they want to say, what's the first thing to clue in on, whether it's sound, behavior, or a field mark? They want something to simplify their first step.
So if they know it's a warbler, but they want to know what to look for first in a warbler, well, look in our guide first, I guess, would be the answer.
That's one of the reasons we use a finder from all different angles. Because it's very possible that the angle that you see from the side view, for example, is not going to be the angle that you have in the field. So we try to give you as many entry points into that as possible. I mean, sometimes behavior, like an ovenbird behavior is very distinctive. So if you see a bird moving his head and so on, then you have a pretty good clue to that ID. But for other species, you know, it's not going to be so much. Swainson's warbler, it does a wing shiver, but it doesn't do it that often. So it really depends. It does require, you know, sort of modifying the ID points to your particular experience at that moment. But we try to give you as many entry points into that process as we can.
And I would say, you know, take whatever the bird gives you, in the sense that, like, if it's color that strikes you, absorb that. If you notice something interesting, like the tail looks weirdly long, or, you know, the bird is singing something weird, or there's a loud, harsh chip, maybe it's a yellow-rumped warbler. So, you know, take what the bird's giving you, but then go one step beyond that and look for one more thing if you can. That's always a good practice, I think, when you're looking at these birds, is get what you see initially, but then try to find one more piece of information that you were looking for. And using our system of the what to look at, you can actually, that's helpful in terms of telling you where you might look for that. So like, does it have wing bars? Does it have streaking? You know, what does the bill look like? Is there a superciliousness? You know, what's the tail like? Anything else that you can pick up? Because a lot of times that'll help you get to your final ID, when otherwise you might not.
One last online question, and that is, what's the variation of the songs you're using for the spectrogram? So in other words, if they're all chip notes within one species, how much variation would there be within that? You choose one to show in your book, but could there be many versions of that?
Within, you're talking about calls in particular. So,
Calls or songs.
okay, so the question is, how much variation is there between the vocalizations of one species? So the answer is, it depends a little bit on the species. Some species are pretty codified. They just have a couple of things, like black-throated green warbler. It's pretty much two song forms, and they're almost always exactly the same. But that being said, its call notes do vary some. And in the call finders, we actually have multiple examples for many species, because some of the calls are little, they do high calls and then they do a lower call, and so there's some variation there, and we try to show that. Most species have some variation, or some have a lot of variation, like redstart, for example. What we try to do is give you representative samples that you can use the structure on, or these other ID points, so that you don't have to memorize every song. That's the key. I'm doing an article for Birding Magazine, it's coming out next month, on the thrashers of southeast Arizona, identifying thrashers. And the top of the article says, you cannot learn thrasher songs. Don't even try, basically. And the reason is, you can't. There's too much variation. You cannot learn those songs. But you can identify them. And the way you identify them is you look at how the song is constructed. So, some thrashers have songs that have run on with very little space. Some have lots of space, and chip notes separate. Some have chip notes built into the element, and different amount of repetition or something. So in warblers, it's the structure, those are the things that tend to be the universal linking for that species. So the more you can hear that, is the yellow warbler, is it doing two things in the middle or not? It doesn't matter if it's doing 2, 3, or 4, if it's more than one. It doesn't matter if it's a high leap or a low leap, it's just something different too. So that our attempt is to try to codify that and sort of, make that as universally, usable for that species as we can.
And that's just to give a little, make that not sound too discouraging in terms of variation, is I actually find, in general, in your normal birding, you're going to find that the songs are actually, I find, surprisingly consistent. It's really amazing how similar they're, within a species.
Right.
If we can take one more question here.
Sorry. Habitat, yeah. So the question is, does the book deal with habitat? Yes, from several different perspectives. Scott mentioned before that we had to cut 100 pages out of the book. Some of that was habitat stuff. But we do have a section in the back that talks about nesting habitat and where they're found. And then in the species account, we have an icon that shows where the bird tends to be. Is it in the top of the tree? Is it in the middle of the tree? Is it wagging its tail? Some other behavioral things as well.
Yeah.
So we try to cover that as much as we can.
And if habitat is a significant ID point for the bird, like for example, common yellowthroat, often found low in skulky and brushy habitat, that will be in the additional photos, in all those extra captions we have, we'll definitely talk
You
about
can
that.
see that, yeah. Yeah, and also during migration, some of those things aren't as useful too, because birds are more opportunistic when they're migrating.
Folks, I hope you'll join me in a round of applause for Scott and Tom. I want to thank you both for sharing your insights and what went into the development of this Warbler Guide. It's really a great testament to what two really committed individuals can create. So many, many thanks.
Books are available in the store if you ever check them out.
Yeah, we're happy to stick around. We can sign some books if you want, and if you have other questions, feel free to.
Yeah, we can